Welcome to a live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, SGS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. I'm also the only host in all of true crime who has a voiceover guy who says my name wrong, calling me Walden, I've realized, instead of Waldman. So I'm going to have to speak to Buzz Bradley. What a great name for a voiceover guy, Buzz Bradley. And I'm going to have him correct that, although we've been using it for the last 2 years. So I was complaining to these gentlemen, and I'll complain to you for a moment, that I went to the gym and I had a simple urge to get a smoothie afterwards. And it was just one of those days where the person wouldn't stop arguing with the woman at the drive-thru. And lo and behold, it was like 25-minute wait. Everyone's honking. I'm surprised there was not a road rage incident where Detective Phil Ramos would have had to get involved. And long story short, I'm in the clear, and then the bridge went up. Here in Miami, we've got these drawbridges that go up to let the boats through. One of those days. Anyway,
just in case nobody thought covering true crime wasn't a dangerous job, right?
Exactly. It can be very dangerous, especially at Smoothie King. I only feel.
But did you have your cell phone ready to start videotaping the confrontation?
I didn't. But Phil Ramos, what do you do when you see road rage, people yelling? What do you do when you see that stuff break out?
You know, it all depends on how bad it is. If it's your typical F you, no F you, and the birds are going back and forth and, stuff like that, you blow it off. You don't get involved. But, and this is just me, and I'm certainly not going to recommend anybody else do this, but if you get to the point where you think somebody's life is in danger, then you take some sort of position where you can either be an excellent witness, or even, God forbid, you have to intercede to keep somebody from being seriously injured or killed. Then, that's a decision that a person has to make on their own.
You heard it there. This is all because of a long wait at Smoothie King today. You're getting amazing life advice as a result. Tim Jansen looking extra dapper today. He was in court, he told me. So, and Josh Ritter looking surprisingly relaxed. How's the baby, Josh?
Baby's good. Thank you very much. She's fattening up, getting chubby cheeks, happy, healthy. We're all good. Not sleeping as much as we would prefer, but we're all happy here. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. So for those who do not know, Detective Phil Ramos, he was a 3-time Las Vegas police officer of the year. He went undercover. Guy drives a Harley. He was a homicide detective. He infiltrated the Cuban mob. He's done a lot of things in his career, and that is a cardboard cutout of him behind himself, which I love. I want to see that up close one day. He looks like Ponch from Chips back there, looking a little bit like Ponch. So I kind of love it. Almost looks like it's CHP uniform, but that is the LV PD uniform. Then you got Tim Jansen, famed Tallahassee criminal defense attorney, who's probably filing some motions as we speak. Spent 5 years as a federal prosecutor. And Josh Ritter, he was a former prosecutor of the year, now criminal defense attorney, part of El Dabe Ritter. And Tim is paying the bills. That's what he's doing right now. And Josh is host of Courtroom Confidential. So we are moving into interesting territory today with the Sarah Boone trial, which is set to start on Monday with jury selection. For those who do not know, Sarah Boone is facing a potential life sentence if she's convicted of murdering her boyfriend, George Torres Jr. He was found dead, zipped inside a suitcase. You heard that right. Dead and zipped inside a suitcase in the couple's apartment. Boone admitted to zipping him inside there. She said that she woke up on the February 25th of 2020. That was a day after or somehow, we don't know, somehow he got zipped in there. And she says that she found him that day on February 25th, 2020, that he was still inside the luggage and he had died. Let me just stop it right there, and let's go to the veteran homicide detective. Nothing surprises these guys, as you know. I've had Phil Waters on many times. He's investigated over 400 homicides. Phil Ramos, when you hear that someone is zipped into a suitcase, typically people dismember people. We've heard this, and they put them in suitcases. Have you ever heard of someone being zipped into a suitcase alive? And what was your reaction to reading this?
Well, I'm probably going to go to hell for this, but I kind of chuckled under my breath. I'm thinking, what in the world? Why zip somebody in a suitcase? And there's so many different possibilities and angles. And as I read through it, while we were drunk and we were playing hide and go seek, and the story just got more ridiculous as I read it. And if you take the humanity out of it, the tragedy that a human being lost its life, and there's a little humor factor in this one, just from all the stories and everything that's been said, and her admissions, and the number of attorneys that she's gone through. You can only imagine what goes on behind those closed doors when the attorney comes to court and says, "Judge, I can't get along with this woman. I can't represent her." That's pretty unique in and of itself.
Yeah. So Cindy Laporta here, Joel, will you be coming? I'd like to actually get out there. So jury selection is supposed to take close to a week. For some reason, we can ask Ritter and or Tim Jansen this, but for some reason, the judge on this case said that he expects jury selection to take quite a while. As I understand it, she's been behind bars since this happened 4 years ago, and she's now on her 9th attorney, a guy named James Owens. And Tim Jansen, James is from the Panhandle, not far from you. When you hear that a client has their 9th attorney, what runs through your mind first?
Well, it's a client you don't want to represent. You don't really want to represent anybody that's had more than one prior lawyer, because you can understand you have a disagreement or a philosophical difference how the case is going to be handled, or maybe they just don't get along. But when you got more than 2 lawyers, that's nothing more than a future bar complaint, and you're not going to get along, and there's trouble, right? That's like dating someone they're on their 5th or 6th wife, or husband. What does that tell you? Not a good forecast for the future.
I would say that is definitely the case. I was watching a lot of the videos last night. The COE, I'm hoping, is going to load in several of these courtesy of Court TV. By the way, Sarah Boone is due in court today at 3 p.m. So we are going to take that hearing live, and I'm going to get to what they're discussing there. But Josh Ritter, prosecutor of the year, you're in LA where a lot of crazy things happen. Have you ever heard of someone being zipped into a suitcase? And by the way, we don't know still somehow how George Torres got into the suitcase or where he did, because there was a neighbor who allegedly heard like a thumping down the staircase. So this neighbor believes that maybe Sarah Boone kind of kicked the suitcase down the stairs with him in it. Josh, anything that remotely comes close to the bizarreness of this particular case that you can recall?
No, I can't. I mean, this one is really one for the record books. It's nightmarish too when you think about it, because the medical examiner says that he died, and I don't have the exact phrasing in front of me, but it was essentially that he died. He asphyxiated to death from being restrained. So in other words, he slowly suffocated to death because he simply could not fill his lungs because he was so tightly, wound inside of that suitcase that he just couldn't ever get himself a good breath. And so it wasn't something that happened quickly, but over the course of perhaps hours, as he just continued to not be able to fill his lungs enough, and then eventually died. That is just torture beyond belief. as far as how he got inside of the suitcase, Sarah says to investigators, if she can be believed, that he got in there voluntarily, that they were playing this game of hide and seek. Now, you know, I know people are going to take a lot of question with what she says and if she can be believed, but I don't know how else, without his cooperation in some way, she could have physically got him inside of that suitcase. I mean, just the physical undertaking of forcing him inside of it, if he was still conscious and awake at the time, just seems like something she could not have accomplished. And he was not a huge man, but still, you know, putting someone inside of a suitcase where they're really, you know, that he didn't have a lot of room to move is my point. So it does sound like perhaps that was something he voluntarily cooperated in, thinking it was all fun and games, thinking she would let him out. And then instead she just allowed him to suffocate to death while she mocked him and videotaped him and laughed at him as he was taking his last breaths. It's nightmare fuel.
Yeah, it's actually I'm claustrophobic, by the way, and we have an elevator in this building that sometimes goes out. That's why I took the stairs today. If I was zipped into a suitcase, I would not be a happy person. It's you know, it's like a soft shell, not a hard shell suitcase. Nevertheless, you know, he was kicking and moving to try to. It almost sounds like we're talking about an SNL sketch here, but we're talking about a human being who lost his life. He literally, this is true. It was a horrific way to go. At one point, Josh, and we're going to see some video in a minute or two. The suitcase, as someone pointed out, turned over. So at one point it was like face up, and then it was face down. We don't really have any idea how or when that happened, right?
No, the reason why we know it happened is there's actually two videotapes. So in one videotape, we see the suitcase oriented in one way, and you can see which side of it is lying up. And then there's another video, and I'm sure they have timestamps and can tell how much time passed in between, but the suitcase is on its other side and in a different position inside of that same room. Now, the point being, if you can connect the dots here, is you see him struggling inside of there. I don't think there's any way he physically could have flipped that suitcase while he was inside of it. So the thought has to be that she did it. At some point, she was moving that suitcase, flipped him around. Perhaps that's the thudding that the neighbor heard. The other thing that the medical examiner revealed was that there was bruising throughout his body. So whether or not she was beating on that suitcase or simply the flipping of it caused him to bruise. But yeah, there's definitely evidence that she may have been manipulating that suitcase even while he was inside of it.
Yeah. So we're going to dig deeper into this, but Tim Jansen, this again, the ninth attorney, James Owens,
Right.
She claims that they were playing hide and seek, and we'll get into some of the details as we go along. By the way, the night this happened, she admits that both were drinking. I think they went through a couple of bottles of wine. They previously had both had domestic violence charges, I believe, against the other. And she did. She said they were playing hide and seek, and Becky Ireland's asking the question, how can she go from hide and seek to a self-defense, which is apparently what, and that was a whole other thing. There was an interesting hearing with James Owens and the judge, and James Owens, Tim, was kind of going in these circles.
Right.
And the judge said, are you claiming self-defense? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, well, why don't you just say that? So I don't know what's going on with this representation. The whole thing is kind of a crazy circus, which is why I might go, and maybe I'll get Tim to meet me in Orlando, not next week, but the week after. But Tim, how do you craft your defense for this since there's videotape that's going to probably...
He's trying to claim the battered syndrome now, which the judge is going to determine whether or not he's going to allow that defense. It doesn't appear that she was being battered at the time. And during all of her interviews, she never said she did this to defend herself or protect herself from imminent harm. She claimed that they were playing this game. So I don't know if the judge will allow it. Normally the judge, if there's any factual evidence at all for a defense, the court has to allow it in. But if it's so far-fetched and there's no factual basis for it, the court can prohibit that. So this lawyer can't argue that defense. And that's a ruling that the court's going to have to make pretty soon. I think he's going to make it before trial.
I think he's going to make it today, maybe. And by the way, Tim, what are you doing at 3 p.m. Eastern, Tim?
I don't know. Am I doing STS?
Yeah, we're going to take the hearing live. And Josh Ritter's invited, as is Phil, if you guys want to come back at 3 o'clock. But there's going to be a live hearing that we're going to take, and they're going to hear some of these motions. The question here to Detective Ramos, could this have been accidental? Phil, I don't need to tell you, but one of the interesting things after this happened, she calls 911. I think it was over maybe 11 hours or 12 hours after the fact. She goes to bed. She wakes up at like 11 a.m. and I think it's at 1 the next morning. And at like 1 p.m., she calls her ex-husband and they call 911. And from the body cam footage of the police arriving on scene to some of the interrogations at the police department, her stories start to, change. And the question is, could this have been accidental? What's your response to that?
Well, I would wonder what aspect of it was accidental. It certainly wasn't accidental that he got into the suitcase, and it wasn't accidental that the suitcase got zipped up, and it wasn't accidental that she was videotaping it and making commentary while she was doing that. So what part of this was an accident? That's quite a stretch. And then, if they're going to go with the what we used to call the burning bed syndrome, the abused spouse, I've had a couple of those, and you have to really, that type of defense shifts the burden of proof from the prosecutors to the defense, because now the defense is going to have to show that the victim was in imminent fear of serious bodily harm or death, and that was their way to defend themselves, and that's how they reacted. Whereas, as everybody can agree, the burden of proof is on the state to prove that this happened beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's an interesting defense, and it has been used successfully in the past. But man, you've got quite a threshold there to show that you were in such dire fear of death or serious bodily harm. The only way you felt to protect yourself or your kids was take this kind of action.
Well, Joe, I think a better defense would have been that we were drunk, we were playing, role playing, and he got into the thing and I passed out, forgot he was there, didn't realize he was there until the morning. And once I found him, then I called 911. I mean, we've seen some adults engage in some behavior like where they strangle or where accidents do happen, right? But this doesn't seem like it fits, but it's better than the self-defense, I would think.
Well, I think so too. And I think what you just said might have been actually sort of what happened. I think they were completely drunk. Somehow he gets in there. She definitely, I think, passed out. Whether she intentionally left them there or not, I don't know. I think that's going to ultimately be maybe what these jurors grapple with. This is a great question, though, from Molly Brown. Who, as adults, play hide and seek? I have no idea. I don't. And if they play her police interrogation, she is sunk. That could be true. But one of the things here, they're trying to suppress the interrogation because of a misread Miranda rights, which I'm going to ask Phil about in a moment. But let's take a look. This is all courtesy of my man, Vinny Politan. Vinny Politan investigates. It's an amazing show. Check it out on the Court TV. So this is George Torres Jr. in the suitcase. Look, we're coming off of Diddy yesterday, which is about as crazy as it gets. This is crazy in a different way. There's just a lot of crazy in this world, I guess. Here we go.
Sarah.
For everything you've done to me.
Sarah.
For everything you've done to me.
Sarah.
You.
Sarah.
You
Sarah.
stupid.
Sarah.
That's my name. Don't wear it up.
I'm going to stop her right there. I should have done a much better job of letting everyone know it's incredibly disturbing. And it's also just crazy to watch. Phil Ramos, you're a homicide detective, retired now. She's slurring her speech. I don't think it takes a alcoholologist to figure that one out. She's slurring her speech, and she's saying this is for what you've done to me, which is maybe why they're going with this self-defense. But just purely from a I guess like an investigative standpoint, how damning is what we're watching right now?
Oh, those are every nail that in the coffin that she needs. I mean, how do you defend against that? The guy is calling out her name. She's laughing and making fun of the situation. And inevitably, I don't know how long this was after he was in the suitcase and she zipped it up, or even if how long it was before he died. But I mean, you're actively watching a person's last moments on this planet. So it's going to be, if the defense can't get that kicked out, they're in a lot of trouble. As damning as it gets.
Yeah. Mish Cavernos, who is at least was at one point, comes to us from Cape Town, South Africa, was a hair and makeup artist. That's important because, believe it or not, this gets even weirder. Sarah Boone's attorney, Tim Jansen, is requesting hair and makeup for his client. I think that's one of the things they're discussing. So I'm going to need you today, Tim. Look at Tim. He's like, he's ready for the weekend. By the way, it is the Jewish New Year tonight, and I've never needed a holiday more in my life. So we're going to be off Thursday, Friday, and then back on Sunday, I think, with a special Dan Markel show. Here's a question to Josh Ritter from Mish, the former makeup artist. If you were here, Mish, you could do the makeup for Sarah Boone. How does the video she recorded of him help her self-defense? Josh, do you agree with the detective? This is her undoing, and she recorded this, of course.
Strangely enough, I think this video is what, when confronted with this video, I think that's where her defense felt like they had to promote some sort of defense to explain her actions here, and they landed on self-defense. And what I mean by that is there's no explaining this video. As the detective points out, this is incredibly damning evidence. It shows someone being, in my view, tortured to death, and her laughing the whole way there. So how do they explain this? Well, what he said in court is that he plans to use self-defense in conjunction with this battered spouse syndrome theory. And what I think he means by that is that battered spouse syndrome allows the defense to argue almost like an extension or a broadening of that immediacy of the threat. In other words, if a person is suffering from a cycle of systematic domestic violence, then they're always in fear. They're in a constant state of fear for their life, and a constant state of feeling like at any moment this person could turn on them. So I think what they're trying to say is that in this moment, she felt like she could not open up that suitcase, and that this was the only time that she felt safe. Again, for everybody listening and watching, I in no way agree with this, and I don't think it's going to be a theory that's going to be persuasive to the jurors. But I think that when confronted with this video is all that the defense is left with. So they're going to try to say that, and there is evidence, by the way, of domestic violence in that home. There were prior arrests, both of her and him. So there is something for the judge to consider, and they can say, listen, this was a violent home. At this point, when anybody else would have let this man out, she didn't, because she's in this constant state of fear, and that allows us to argue this kind of rigged up theory of self-defense. If you can follow the connecting of all of those dots, I think that's where they're going.
Yeah, but the problem you had is he's incapacitated. When you
100%.
have that defense and fear, you always have that fear. She could have called 911 right now
100%.
because he couldn't get out of that. And there's no reason why she's in imminent fear when he's incapacitated.
Yeah, and
100%.
obviously, yeah, Elenator, I never know how to say this. She wasn't in fear at all during the video. They were said to, by the way, be having a good night, getting along swimmingly that night. Jimmy McNutty, Tim Jansen, a trial watcher since the early 90s. I have to say that because people say, why do you always say that? Which is why I always say it. A trial watcher since the OJ days. The taunting on video disproves the accident. I mean, at least the accident part of the theory. Tim, is that not true? That she's claiming it's an accident, but here we are taunting. Do they I cancel each other out, or what? What happens here with that?
I think he's right. I think part of this does show that he's hurt her in the past. She's saying things, this is for what you've done to me. But really, there is no defense. She should plead straight up, try to get a life sentence. This lawyer came in probably for the publicity, right? I don't think he's getting paid a lot, and he doesn't have much to work with. This video is devastating evidence. And then you add in her statements to the police. Now, I don't know what the problem with the Miranda was, but it was clearly a custodial interrogation. She was in a room. She wasn't free to leave. They had to read her Miranda. Did she sign it and waive it? That's it. You don't have I don't know I like to know what the arguments are that there was a misreading. Normally they make you sign it or they read it to you on video. And when you acknowledge it, that's a waiver. So I don't think she has much of a defense.
We'll get into the Miranda rights because it had something to do with the last two lines that Phil will know about. Do you happen to know the manner of death? I assume it's suffocation. Josh Ritter, do you know?
Yeah, the medical examiner said that it was asphyxiation due to, and I wish I had the exact words in front of me, but it was asphyxiation essentially due to being restrained within that suitcase, meaning that it wasn't like she, had her hands around his neck, but it was that this man simply could not fill his lungs enough. And over a period of time, by the way, they believe that he may have been inside of that suitcase for 11 hours. So over a period of time, he simply could not get enough air into his lungs and eventually lost consciousness, we pray, and then died.
Yeah. Do we know, Josh, without getting too morbid, do we know how long he was in there before at least he passed out? Roughly?
I don't think that the medical examiner was able to pin that down. I just know that at one point they believe that he was in there for around 11 hours.
Wow. And Catherine in Maui points this out correctly. She calls her ex. It's not Twitter, by the way, just her ex, instead of 911. And then she calls 911. So this video is obviously upsetting, but let's watch it because this is at the crux of this case, and then we'll get the guest's take on it. Here we go. This is where we left off.
Sarah, I can't breathe, babe. Seriously.
Yeah, that's when you do when you choke me.
Sarah. 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 Sarah, I can't breathe, babe.
That's on you.
Sarah, I can't breathe.
That's on you.
Sarah.
Gonna stop it right there again. Tim Jansen.
This is so disturbing. It's so disturbing watching this.
100%. It really is. I mean, it is like, part of you think it's just so crazy. But Tim, if Sarah Boone by the way, she put out like a help wanted sign essentially from jail, which is how this guy James Owens found her. But Tim, if you saw this video, would you ever even consider defending this woman? I mean, is there any? I'm not a lawyer. I don't see how there's any way she gets around this video with a jury of her peers. There's just no chance. It's done.
If I saw this video, I probably would not agree to represent her. there's certain things you do in life you can pick and choose. And luckily, I'm at the stage I can pick and choose the cases. I'm not the public defender and have been appointed this person. This is so horrific that I just couldn't. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it.
Detective Ramos, you know, let's say you were the detective working this case. You ask for her cell phone. You see this video. Where do you start with your line of questioning? What would you want to know? What would you ask her?
Well, I'd back up to the night all this started. How did the day go? What were you guys doing? What were you drinking? How long were you drinking? Was there anybody else here in the house? Were the neighbors coming by? You want to establish, like we've said many times, the victimology here. So at what point did it go to, let's just say they were doing fun and games. Let's say they were playing hide and seek. You go hide under the bed, or you go hide in the closet and I'll scare you, that type of thing. But to use that as the reason for putting them in the suitcase, well, how stupid is that? I mean, let's play it out. Okay, yeah, we're going to play hide and seek. Well, here, hide inside the suitcase and I'll pretend I can't find you until you stop breathing. It makes no sense. So you just, this is one of those cases where you just keep giving her enough rope, keep giving her enough rope, keep giving her enough rope, and she's doing a pretty good job of hanging herself right here. I can't imagine what her reasoning was for taking the video. I would have to say that I don't think that when she put him in the video and zipped him up, there was an intent there for him to die. That kind of escapes me, because she's just sitting there laughing at him and listening to him. She really wanted him to die, then she would have taken some steps to expedite the death instead of sitting there listening. And maybe she was so drunk that she passed out, and it went to the point where he could no longer get enough air in his lungs. The positional asphyxia aspect of it comes into play, and she wasn't able to react to that.
How did she video? Is this a camera in the house, or is this her phone?
I believe it's a cell phone. Josh, do you know for
sitting
sure?
there watching this,
you
could argue she cruelly did want to watch him die to his last breath.
It is her cell phone. The way that they found this video, in fact, was when she went to the police station, they asked her if they could look through her phone, and she voluntarily gave them consent to look through it. And they found the video. And according to her at that time, she said that she didn't even have a recollection of having taken these videos, which again, kind of goes towards what was her level of intoxication, if she can be believed, that evening. But, Tim brings up a good point. Why was she taking this video? It's so curious to me. It's obvious that she's kind of enjoying the moment of putting him through this torture and taunting him. But you have to wonder, why did she want to videotape it? Was there an argument she wanted to show it to him later? I don't know. Does that go towards her theory that there was never an intent to actually take his life? Or was this something that she was enjoying, knowing that she was never going to let him out of there until he was dead, and wanted that to memorialize it? I don't know. But it again, is just another mystery, but I think gives us a view inside of her mind that while this man is literally begging for his own life, she's sitting there calmly taking a video and laughing at him.
Yeah, I think it's just so creepy, because we hear about murders all the time, but we're literally watching a murder here. That's what's so incredibly creepy. I mean, we were covering yesterday the live hearing, the preliminary hearing for the sheriff in Kentucky, Sheriff Steins, who shot and killed Judge Kevin Mullins, and they without warning kind of showed that video on the Zoom. Luckily, we did not take it, but it is disturbing to watch videos like that, where you see a person losing their life, and this in such a cruel way is especially tough. There's no doubt it is tough to look at. Violet says, Tim Jansen, that the ex-husband is going to testify that Sarah was violent towards him too. As I said, she has a history of DV. So by the way, shout out to Defense Diaries who's in the chat, Bob Mata. But Tim, when he testifies on top of this video being played, I mean, I just, do you see any way the jury has any sympathy for this woman?
No, that evidence will be admissible. It's similar like evidence, show a pattern of conduct of violence, and it's cruel behavior, and she's enjoying it, watching this, knowing this. So I don't know what defense they really have, other than she was such a victim that she was getting back at him because she's mentally disturbed. She would probably need to have a psychiatrist come in and try to get an NGI, right? Not guilty by reason of insanity, because she was such a victim at the time. She was reliving the violence against her, and in her right mind, she was giving out, doing this, not knowing right from wrong, and that death could have been happening. I mean, I think that's all she has.
By the way, Bob Mata, Defense Diaries, bringing this up, so I'll address it now with Detective Ramos. The last question. So, Detective Ramos, there's actually going to be this hearing today at 3:00 where they're trying to suppress the interviews, the police interviews, because of this. The last question wasn't read, which is, now that you've been advised of your rights, do you wish to speak with us? So they did not read that last question. How frustrating is that from your point of view? How dumb a mistake is that? And do you think it's going to hold up with this judge, that they're not going to be able to admit these police interviews because of this?
I hope not, but that's why we have those pre-printed cards with the signature line, and I mean, you read them exactly the way they're prepared, and you don't leave anything out, and you don't add anything to it. Yeah, and that is the last thing. Now that I've made you aware of your rights, do you wish to continue speaking to me? So, if that was the case, if that happened, did it harm her to continue speaking to the detectives? Because, the crux of Miranda is, you're in custody, you have the right to remain silent, you don't have to say anything, you want an attorney, you want to give you an attorney, and all of that. That's the meat of Miranda. That very last part, I don't recall anybody not ever closing their Miranda warnings without saying that, because the defense can say, well, I wasn't given the option not to speak to him. I was told that I have to speak to him. I think I'm not the legal expert. You got two very well educated and esteemed attorneys there. I don't know if they've ever come across anything like that, and how it would affect everything she said after Miranda, because that's what it's going to apply to.
So the question at this point is, if you were read your rights and you said, I'm not going to speak, right? The police officers stop the conversation, and then they put you in the back of the car and they're driving, and you initiate the conversation and start talking. That's admissible. It's only if the police initiate the conversation after you've invoked your rights. So the key thing is going to be on this video is, once they read what they read, who initiated the next conversation? Did she or did they, right? And at any point, did she say, I don't want to talk, I want a lawyer? Those are the things the judge is going to look at.
Could I jump in?
Yeah, please do.
This argument, in my view, is a little weak tea by the defense, because what happens when you see, first of all, it's important to understand she was advised previously of all of her rights and chose to speak. They then bring her in for another interview, and it's during this second interview that they again advise her. They read all of the admonitions off of that card. She responds to all of them affirmatively. Yes, I understand. Yes, I understand. And the very last, it's not even a question. Well, I suppose it's a question. The very last statement there is, with these rights in mind, do you wish to speak to us? But if you read the transcript, after she's advised of all of this, she just starts speaking, and they start talking about the conversation. they are trying to say that because she wasn't given this last idea of, with all of this in mind, do you wish to speak with us, that somehow makes the rest of the advisement null and void, and every statement that she makes after that inadmissible. I don't think that's going to hold up with this judge at all. I think, Tim knows this, and Detective Ramos knows this. The Miranda rights are not some sort of like Harry Potter spell that you have to say the words exactly right before you can conjure up the Miranda, advisement protections. It's advising this person and them understanding it, them appreciating what's about to take place, and them fully agreeing to speak. And yes, these detectives will read off of a card because that's, long established solid case law that those are what you should say. But just because they miss this very last kind of introduction to their interview, I don't think this judge is going to find that to be persuasive.
But if you think about it, the warnings were given. The only part that wasn't given was the question, do you want to speak? And she initiated the conversation. So clearly she understood her warnings that they could be used against you. You have a right to a lawyer. Those rights were given, and they were previously given. I agree. The judge is not going to throw this out. Not a chance.
Yeah, and we're gonna find out hopefully with Tim at 3:00 live coverage of Sarah Boone's hearing, the last one before her trial begins on Monday. Her prior attorney, according to Armand Julie Frew, had previously said she was read all her rights prior to the interview, grasping at straws. So we've got that. My man, Myron Sanchez. If she passed out, who turned around the suitcase? Good question, unless she did it before she passed out. Josh Ritter, there was a question that was interesting. Is the jury going to find out that she had 8 previous attorneys? Is that going to be allowed in? Probably not, I would guess.
No, I mean, perhaps if she takes the stand and somehow that slipped in, but that's not something that's important or relevant towards these proceedings. How many prior attorneys she had. I'm just trying to think of an instance where I've ever experienced that. I mean, I've maybe if, somebody had previously represented her at the preliminary hearing and that testimony comes in, that might be made known to the jurors that it was a different attorney representing her at that time. But the idea, that this person has ran through all these different attorneys is not going to become an issue at the trial.
By the way, happy birthday to Nancy Best. What a good name. What a good last name, Nancy Best. I feel like if it was Joel Best, I could have been ABC network news anchor. It's a good last name. Kathy, she's expecting to receive an apology and be set free. She's beyond outrageous. I would have to agree with that. This whole thing is a head scratcher. Let's watch the rest of this video. We'll get some more reaction from the detective. Tim Jansen's like, I'm done with it, but they're going to be playing this for the jurors. Let's watch a couple I think it's another minute or so.
Reel around some.
This juror's already made up his
I want
mind.
to give video for it extra. Because I got this.
Sarah.
Reel around some.
Sarah.
And you can see it moving, which is...
I can't breathe, babe.
Oh. That's what I feel like when you cheat on me.
Sarah.
Oh, she cheated on me.
Breathe, Sarah.
Yeah. You should probably shut the up.
Sarah.
And that might be the most disturbing video I've ever seen. Detective Ramos, she did say, as Tim just pointed out, that's what it must feel like when you cheat on me. She's obviously got issues. She claims, as Julie Frew pointed out, she claims she was not drinking that night. I don't think she would pass a sobriety test because she barely utter a word clearly. What do you make of the last part of that video, Detective Ramos?
Well, it just goes to show her state of mind, that she just couldn't care less that, her boyfriend was in there suffering, and, whether she realized he was dying or not, it really doesn't matter. The fact is that he was asking to be released from there, and that he was having trouble breathing, and she's the one that put him in that position in the first place. So, just common decency would, even if she was using it to punish him, and say, hey, this is what it's like when you hurt me or when you cheat on me, and whatever her excuse is, then you open it up and say, okay, did you learn a lesson or something like that? But none of that is there. There's absolutely zero rationale to her behavior there. It just isn't there. And I keep going back to the uh, abused partner defense. That's just not there either. But like I said, I've had a couple of those that were absolutely defendable, and we ended up not making an arrest at all because of the behavior of the victim and the abuser. It's just not. This lady, like Tim said, just plead up, man, and get it over with, because you're going to be in prison the rest of your life. Why waste all this time?
Yeah. Go ahead, Josh.
Sorry, but to the detective's point, and I think getting back to this Miranda issue a little bit, the reason why they want that statement that she makes to police kept out, or part of the reason they want it kept out, is because of how much it does undercut this new self-defense, battered spouse syndrome theory that they're trying to bring, because they ask her during that interview, what was your motivation? And she says, I didn't have we were having a good time. We were enjoying ourselves. And she kind of hems and haws. And then she says, I just kind of blame it on the wine. So she doesn't take that opportunity to say, I was scared for my life. I thought if I unzipped that, he would kill me. I was paralyzed by fear. She never says any of that. And realizing that, I think they know that if they're going to pursue this defense theory, they have to keep that statement out, because her statement to police undercuts it.
Tim Jansen, thank you for that super chat, or super sticker. Martina, I never know the difference. Martina, Tim Jansen, I don't think she intended to kill him, but it is definitely gross disregard of human life. Don't quote me, I'm not a lawyer, but this brings up an interesting point. What part of this legally, where's the importance of whether she intentionally or did not intentionally do it? Where does it lie legally here in this case?
It's kind of a gray line, because where premeditation can be formed at any point. And while maybe she didn't intend it when she put him in that suitcase, but when he's telling her he can't breathe and he gets quieter and less communication, she has to realize at this point the risk of death is imminent, or could happen. Could be second-degree murder if it's a heat of passion or something. It's so disturbing watching that. It was like power. She was under power. She wasn't under fear, right? The difference between fear and power. She wasn't under fear when she's talking. She was under power. She had control of him. She could have easily called 911. She could have easily left, and she didn't. Okay. I don't think any juror is going to buy anything. Now, whether they get first-degree murder, whether that would stand up on appeal, I don't know. But maybe second-degree murder. But it's just disturbing. Yeah. And I've seen a lot, and I'm disturbed. Yeah. Can you imagine what a lay person, grandma, comes in there for jury duty in Orlando and sees that?
Tim Jansen, Ramos and Ritter have seen the worst of the worst, and Tim can't even watch this. Courtroom Confidential, that is Josh's podcast. You better check it out. Gifting a Surviving the Survivor membership. Appreciate that. We got a comment here. News Nation reporting that Brian Boone, Sarah's ex-husband, will not be at the trial. He and his family want to move on with their life. It sounds like he might be called as a witness, though. So I'm not sure where that stands with the
subpoena. He'll be there.
Yeah, exactly. With the subpoena, he will be there. So this thing gets even weirder, because there was a hearing that was scheduled for Thursday. Because of the hurricane, it got pushed back to Friday. And then they had all kinds of issues with their Zoom. Surprise, surprise. So Apparently someone was yelling at the judge, the defense attorney. There was all kinds of craziness going on in the call, which just is on brand for this. And then, of course, we talked about it. The defense made this argument briefly about not being Mirandized properly because this last sentence was never read. The judge seems at this last hearing on Friday to be incredibly frustrated. And he reiterated to both sides that the trial date was quickly approaching. He gave Sarah Boone's attorney a deadline of whatever September 27th was. I know, 2 more videos. Whatever September 27th was to file any more motions. And Owens tells the judge, we're going to do our best to get all this resolved and be ready for trial. But Tim Jansen, to you, I've asked you about this before. This judge is annoyed to death by, I think, both Sarah Boone and the defense attorney going into the trial. Judges are people, so what kind of impact does this have?
Well, so the motion, the defense he wants is there's a 2-step element, right? You have to give proper notice to the state so they can respond, and whether or not there's a factual basis for this defense. So that judge could find it wasn't properly. He could find both, right? It wasn't timely filed by the defense, and I don't find a factual basis for it. Now, I don't know how long this lawyer's been on the case, but I think the judge said, I'm not giving any continuances. So if you get on this case, you have to know I'm not continuing the trial. And so otherwise, the defendant can always hire a new lawyer all the time, and you never get cases to trial. At some point, the court has control of the case, and you suffer the consequences. But this judge also knows it's a high-profile case, and he's going to do everything he can to make sure the verdict or a conviction is upheld and that she gets all the rights she can. So
yeah,
that's his job.
A lot of people are asking. So jury selection starts on Monday for this trial. It's in Orlando, which is about 3 hours from Miami. Jury selection, I think, is going to take most of the week. I think the following week, I'm going to head over and bring you lunch lives and do some lives in the evening, because I am pretty fascinated with this case and how incredibly disturbing it is. Black Widower and the Republic of Ireland, gifting 5 Survive and the Survivor memberships. Thank you, Harriet. This is a great show. Why don't you leave your DNA on that like button? That would be awesome. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you hate it, subscribe 3 times. That would subscribe. If you do it twice, it unsubscribes. Please like the show. By the way, again, Sarah Boone's defense attorney, James Owens, was requesting hair and makeup for Sarah Boone. The prosecutor did a double take when that was stated in court. The prosecutor's name is Will J., and his quote was, "As far as I know, she'd be the first person to ever have done that in this courtroom." He's just beside himself. I mean, Tim, what is the appropriate? We were talking about this with Donna Adelson. They wanted to dye her hair, and the judge said, I think, no. She just had her hair pulled back in a ponytail. I mean, have you ever heard of someone getting hair and makeup, a female, prior to a murder trial?
Well, if they're not in custody, they can do it, but not while you're in custody. A trial is not a glamour shots production, right? You're allowed to have clothing. You can get dressed, and you can be seen not in cuffs in front of the jury, so it appears you're not in custody. But you're not allowed to have. I've never heard of that either. I would never even ask that.
There you go. Kathy again. She may have found redemption, and she admitted to being an alcoholic who was blacked out drunk, expressed remorse, and quietly went and served her sentence. I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll see. She couldn't have been too afraid of him if she got him in the suitcase. I'm not sure how an adult male gets in a suitcase. Maybe now Tim Jansen, the new thin Tim Jansen, maybe we could squeeze him in a suitcase, but I think that would still be a challenge. This is the body cam footage, Detective Ramos, when police arrive on scene. Again, this happened on the 24th of February, 2020. She goes to bed, calls her ex-husband around 11 a.m. when she wakes up the next day, doesn't call 911 until about 1 p.m. And this is what happens when police arrive on scene.
We have a puzzle that we started in there. Okay. We've been doing art, trying to take the stuff off the wall to make new art put up there, like having a good time with one another. But we're drinking. We had a bottle of wine last night. Okay. Fine. So then it's like we decided to play hide and seek, right? Okay. So he gets in the suitcase. Okay. Who is this guy? That's my ex-husband, my former husband. How did he live here with you guys? No, I called him over here. Okay. Okay. I didn't know what to do. Okay. I didn't know what to do. Okay. So then he came over here. Here, let's talk in private. Okay. I called you guys. I tried giving you the problem is I fell asleep. I fell asleep. When did you do CPR? This morning. When I found it. Before you called? Yes. 1 o'clock right now. I tried. I was awake, but I actually got out of the bed at like 12:30ish, whatever. So I
I'm gonna stop it right there. Detective Ramos, this woman just strikes me. I don't know how else to say this. Is batshit, you know what? I guess I said the bad word, batshit crazy. Just totally insane. And what's so striking to me, like I mean, this is if I killed someone accidentally or otherwise, I would be just beyond consolation. I'd be devastated. Not once do you hear her even mention the ex-boyfriend. Is that something that you noticed? And what else did you notice?
No, just her lack of remorse about what happened. I mean, by now she knows that he's dead. She remembered enough detail the night before, whether she truly blacked out or she's just trying to use that as an excuse. She's acting like he just ran away and went shopping at Walmart, hasn't come back. But her lack of reaction, her supposedly excited rendition of what happened. She just is making things up as she goes along. Every question that the officer asks, you can see her reaction is and then she'll come up with an answer. So right there, that she's not being honest and not being truthful. And how do you perform
I mean, Detective,
CPR?
what is the job of a patrol officer who's arriving on scene? What should she? Is there anything she should be doing that would help you as a homicide detective later on? Is she doing all the right things?
Yeah. Patrol officers are there, number one, to see if there's anybody that can be saved. If there really is a person that's dead and in need of medical attention, their first thing to do is render aid to the injured people, and just get the basics. Okay, ma'am, what happened? What's going on here? And since she's not in custody and she's not being charged, Miranda doesn't apply when the first responding officers are trying to establish, well, was a crime committed? What happened? Are there witnesses? What did you see? What do you know? And that's what they pass on to the detectives once the detectives get there. Their primary responsibility is to stabilize the scene. Once they realize there's a body in there, they would have no way of knowing whether it was a homicide or accidental or suicide or anything like that, unless it's obvious. And in this case, it may not have been so obvious. So, they clear the crime scene, don't let anybody in, and have her outside and talk to people separately and wait for the detectives to show up. And, they're like, oh, thank God, here's the detectives. You can have her. Go.
Yeah. By the way, this is happening right where the Maddie Soto case is happening, and Jen Soto showed no emotion. This woman is emotionless, has no remorse. I mean, she's got some emotion, but it's all about her own saving her own behind here. She does sound like she's 12. I was going to say I thought I was in Arrested Development, but this is next level, it seems like. Josh, just an interesting question, and then we'll play this out. Does anyone think Sarah will testify in this case? Josh, are we going to see this woman on the stand having to explain what happened?
I do. I think she will. For a couple of reasons. One, if they're bringing this idea of battered spouse and self-defense, I think she has to take the stand to explain that, to explain the fear she was in, to explain why she couldn't, simply let this man out of the suitcase. I think that video of when we see the suitcase and her mocking him, she's going to have to get up there and somehow explain that. But beyond those kind of strategic reasons, if we know anything about this person, she's demonstrated that she wants to call the shots. I mean, she's burned through 9 attorneys now, likely because she likes to call the shots and run the show. And I think that this attorney, despite any efforts he might make to try to keep her off of the stand, I think she's going to want to have this moment. I mean, a person who asks for professional hair and makeup is a person who wants their day in the spotlight. And I think all signs point towards it. This is one of those rare cases where I'll probably be shocked if she doesn't take the stand.
The hearing, by the way, that's interesting. That makes me want to go to this trial even more. Again, it's taking place in Orange County, Florida, which is Orlando. The hearing, the last hearing on this case is in 90 minutes. We're going to wrap in about 20 minutes or so. And then hopefully Tim, they're all invited, but can't take Tim. Tim is my color commentary guy. So hopefully Tim will come back. Nito Ceramics on the side here. Why are there so many bizarre cases in Florida? I don't know. It's the heat. It's the people. I don't know.
Nito, Joe, this is a benefit of having the body cam, right?
Yeah.
Now the patrol officer doesn't have to go back and remember what she said. The patrol officer there is to render aid, safety, and secure the scene. She wants her to talk. The more she talks, the better for the detective, because she's saying things. And now we don't have a dispute what she said. You've got this, and it's admissible. There's no motion to suppress this. So this could also kill her defense, because she never mentions anything about I was in fear of my life.
That is an amazing point. Nito with some funny comments. Can she get life in a suitcase? I don't think that is humanitarian in the United States of America. I don't think maybe in a different country it would happen. Nito also asked Josh Ritter, and I think that question may have been somewhat based in reality, was from a civil standpoint, would anybody be able to sue the suitcase maker? That seems like a stretch, Josh Ritter, right?
Don't be shocked. Don't be shocked.
That's a good point too. You can file a lawsuit if you've got a laptop and able to get the court documents together. But I mean, if you want to talk about the unsafe way to handle a suitcase, though, it wouldn't shock me if there is some label inside of every suitcase that says, not for someone to get inside of it because of situations like this, even innocently in the past. But great question.
Yeah. The answer, Buttercup, is yes. We are covering the hearing today, assuming there's not a catastrophic technical disaster, which happens every other time we try to do it. But we should be good.
I'll see you back at 3.
Are you bouncing out?
Yeah, I'm bouncing out.
All right. I'll send you the link. Thank you, Tim.
Okay. All right.
That was the great Tim Jansen.
Hey,
take care. Tallahassee's famed criminal defense attorney. Okay. So this let's play out this police arriving on scene. This is the body cam video. By the way, Detective Ramos, silly question, but did the officers turn on the body cam every time, or is it like motion activated? How does it work? Because I feel like I would.
Yeah, they physically turn it on about the time they're getting out of the car. Once they announce to dispatch they've arrived, and they'll say body cam's coming on, it's not running their entire shift. They turn it on and off when each department has its own protocols for when to turn it on, when to turn it off. But it's usually when they're arriving on a scene and they're getting out of the patrol car that the body cam comes on.
I asked because I feel like I would forget to do that sometimes. Need a break from the nutty true crime news. The fall is a great time to cozy up with a book. Did you know, Joel? Just thank you so much. It's a book about my mom, Holocaust survivor, surviving the survivor. Guarantee it will change the way you look at life. Here's the rest of this.
Came downstairs, and I was like, "Oh, he's in the suitcase still." And that's when I found him, and I took him out and tried doing CPR, and then I called him, and then I called you guys.
Did he get here before the fire department got here?
Who?
Your husband or your ex-husband?
Yes.
Okay. Where does he live at?
Right down the street.
Okay. So you were praying and you get him up there?
I did, but then I fell asleep.
Okay. You're okay. I wasn't here. I'm just trying to figure out what happened.
I fell asleep, so I don't know what they suffocated or like had an aneurysm or a heart attack or
What
what?
kind of medical conditions does he have?
None that I know of.
Nothing that you know of.
None
Did
that
you
I
take
know
any
of.
medicine?
No,
last night?
no.
No medicine.
All we had was a bottle of wine. Literally, just a bottle of wine.
Okay.
Doing puzzle artwork. Then we decided to play hide and seek.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that happened.
I gotta
I'm gonna
say,
mute it, but go ahead, Josh.
no, I mean, kudos to that officer too, because these are some great questions that she's
Yeah.
asking. Like the idea of wait a minute, you called your ex first. He arrived before medical personnel. Well, how far away does he live? What kind of medical conditions does he have? These are really great questions by a responding officer.
Yeah, I thought so too. Detective, what about that? The fact that she does call her ex before calling law enforcement, and she also has some really interesting facial expressions, I guess is the nice way to put it. But what about that fact, Detective? If you're interviewing her, are you curious about why she would call her ex-husband, who she's divorced from, for a reason before she would call 911?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's one of the first things I would ask her. Why'd you call your husband? How come you didn't call 911? Her response could be, well, I didn't know if he was dead, or I didn't know if he needed help, and I didn't know what to do, which she has already said, well, I didn't know what to do. But that tells me she probably didn't realize that he was dead, or she would have, logically, she would have called 911. And then she says, if you listen close, well, yeah, I opened it up and I saw that he was dead, so I pulled him out and tried doing CPR. No, that's not happened. Not at, not when rigor mortis is set in and the body is stiff. I don't know if rigor had left the body yet or not, but she's not going to pull anybody out of that suitcase when they die in a crunched up position like that. It's going to take two big, strong guys to do that.
Wow. Just looking at this, Detective Ramos, without the sound, just for a second, let's just watch this muted. If you look at her, I'm just trying to think how I would react. I'd be sobbing, I think, sitting down on. But look, she's like incredulous, like these facial expressions. This is not what you'd expect from someone who discovers your boyfriend dead, right?
Right. And incredulous is the perfect word, because you can see she's making things up as she goes along. There's that momentary pause, and you can even see it on her face, and she's like, "Oh, yeah. That's what happened. Oh, yeah. So, I think the realization that she's in a lot of trouble because her boyfriend's dead based on what she did, and she's trying to cover her tracks as best she can. But that would be, why did you call your ex-husband and not 911 or call the police?
You got to think she's also hung over here by. I know wine. I always wake up with a hangover, but you got it. She was also asking for water while the police were there. But so that's this video. There's one more I'm going to get to in a second, and then we'll get some final thoughts before the. That's the wrong one. Before the case hearing on at 3:00. We're going to take this final Sarah Boone hearing live with Tim Jansen at 3 p.m. today. So Josh Ritter, state attorney William J. argued that the cornerstone is self-defense. That he was saying this in court. Well, the cornerstone of the defense will be self-defense, but she repeatedly said there was no violence that day. That's a problem. She also said in an interview with a detective that she and George were on good terms the night she was arrested for his murder. She said, nobody touched nobody, and I don't have any injuries. He and I have not been at it. Judge Michael Kraynick got into a bit of an argument with the defense about spending 4 years claiming it was an accident, but now claiming it was a justifiable use of force. This Judge Kraynick is incredibly aggravated. What about the fact, though, that this is her 9th attorney? I suppose he has, he's coming into it. So, he wants to bring forward his defense, right? So is the judge, I guess, intimating or saying that he should have this new defense attorney, should he have had the same defense as the previous, it's hard to say this, 8 defense attorneys? Should he have fallen in line, in other words?
No, I mean, I think what you were seeing is the judge is exhausted and frustrated, and he's been dealing, the attorneys have been lucky enough to withdraw, but he's had to deal with her for all this time. And it's been an exhausting experience for the judge. And he just wants to finally put all these issues to rest and get this trial going. Any attorney is allowed to defend their client in the best way that they see possible. And if that means that they change their theory at the 11th hour, then they change their theory at the 11th hour. And I don't think a judge can criticize that. I think what he was taking issue with, though, is that as Tim was mentioning earlier, certain of these defenses, you can't just make the argument, like a third party culpability. You just can't walk into court and start saying that, or a self-defense. You have to have some evidence for the judge to allow you to start to make these arguments, especially when it comes to something like self-defense or battered spouse syndrome. So that's why this judge needs to make a ruling on that. Will they be allowed to even argue that? And if there's evidence that does exist, even if it's small, even if it's not convincing, but as long as there's something there, some evidence that they could argue that, then the judge has what's called a sua sponte duty to allow that, because the judge is going to give an instruction at the end about self-defense in this case, if he's allowing them to bring that theory. So I think that's really what all the exhaustion is about. It might be directed at this final attorney, but this attorney, I feel bad for him. He's put in a position where, he's now on the eve of trial and has to have something to argue in court.
Yeah. By the way, detective from Canine Catherine, our good friend in Maui, she kind of throws out potential alibis. I don't know if it was subconscious or not, saying he could have had an aneurysm. He could have had a heart attack. Instead of saying I was wasted and he got zipped, we still don't know, but he got zipped into a suitcase. Is this curious to you as a homicide detective to hear comments like that?
No, that's her looking for an excuse why he's dead without admitting that she had something to do with his death. People say that all the time. Well, I think he had a heart attack. He just dropped dead right there. And, without notifying them that there's a bullet hole in the back of the skull. So she's just trying to come up with some legitimate reason why this was a natural death and not a homicidal death. And yeah, I'm not surprised by that.
Yeah. Tim is gone now, but Josh, she's admitting now that she was drinking, at least in this part, under the influence. Does that give her any kind of leeway in terms of the law? Would she get any kind of, I don't know, reduced sentence or something along those lines, based on the fact that if she does come out and say, look, I was just completely drunk that night, I don't even remember what happened. It doesn't seem like they're going in that direction, but how does the law handle an admission of, I guess, being drunk?
Well, voluntary intoxication is usually not a defense in this type of situation. But I think what a lot of the people who are commenting on this are identifying is that seems the far more plausible explanation for her behavior, and might at least be a mitigating factor to be argued as far as her intent. Because if she's stone cold sober, then she's just, sociopathically torturing this man. But if she can be believed that she was drinking, I think she sounds very intoxicated on that video. She said a couple of times to investigators and this responding officer that she simply drank too much and fell asleep. At least there might be some argument to be made that she didn't have the intent to actually kill him, and maybe was intoxicated and enjoying the fact that she was causing him a lot of grief and trying to punish him for what she believed were, past acts of domestic violence or something along those lines. But it seems a far more easily built-in defense, and I don't understand why they're pursuing that unless you believe that she's still the one, pulling the puppet strings with this attorney and basically telling him, this is the defense I want you to put forward.
These comments are really good. Nito was saying it's like watching somebody drown and you've got a life, you've got a life vest in your hand and you don't throw it to them.
Yeah.
It's akin to that, I would say. This is the final video, then we'll get final thoughts, I promise here. This is Detective Ramos's wheelhouse. This is Sarah Boone being questioned by detectives once this all played out.
Yeah, but you told me on recording like that you were not drunk, he was not drunk, you guys were having a good time.
I can't get drunk. Number one, I do not want to get drunk.
Lie. Ramos right there. I mean, she's wasted in that video. I don't know how else to say it nicely. As a detective, and you these guys have definitely seen the body cam footage. Are you now going to hop on that, detective?
Yeah, but not right away. You save that. Just let her keep telling the story, and then you hit her with all the inconsistencies. And you might even play the video where she says, "You know what? It was the booze. It was the wine, and I blacked out. That's what happened." And then you say, "So, which one is it? Did you drink or did you not drink? Because you said both."
Yeah.
And once you catch them in one or two lies, then they're doing a whole lot of backpedaling and trying to figure out that, just tell the truth from the beginning, because you're not going to remember all the lies when you're in a case like this. It doesn't work that way.
This is a clever comment. Sarah Boone has some real baggage. I would agree with that. All right, let's watch the this play out.
I don't like being non-complimentous, having my wits about myself. I don't like feeling out of control.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm just saying you're making it sound like he's a raging alcoholic today, and yesterday I was kind of asking you those questions and you're like a little defensive, like, no, we're not alcoholics.
I'm not.
We are not, but you guys were both sober on Sunday, to your knowledge, because when I said you went and passed out, you were like, no, I didn't pass out, I just fell asleep. So now it's kind of like, what is it? Were you guys drinking and it got out of hand and it got physical?
No.
Or is it?
Sunday was one of the better days that we have had in quite some time.
So where were you guys at on drunkenness, not drunkenness on Sunday? You told us you weren't drunk.
No, I was not drunk.
Right.
So I'm going to play this muted, but I mean, Detective Ramos, she just said on videotape, which is indisputable, that it was one of the better days that they had. I mean, it sounds like they were getting along fine. How the hell are they going to argue? I know you're not the lawyer here, but this battered spouse syndrome.
Well, that's the problem. And so let me give you an example of a perfect battered spouse syndrome. And I have to give a little bit of a trigger warning, because what I'm about to describe is pretty intense and pretty difficult to hear. A case that I had, a 25-year-old woman and her 28-year-old alcoholic husband were target practicing out in the desert. They have two kids, 7 and 8 years old, and he's drunk, and he has a history of abusing her. This particular day, he just went over the edge, and he told her on the way back from the range, tomorrow morning after the girls go to school, I'm going to kill you, so get ready for that. He actually took a bullet out of his gun and wrote her name on the casing of the bullet and put it back in the gun. And he says, look, see this? And so the next morning, when the girls get up to go to school, the mom says, go to the neighbor's house, don't go to school, don't come back until I come and get you. And he spent the night torturing her. He had a cigarette and he burned her nipples. He burned her areolas in a pattern. He burned her pubic area. He scorched her pubic hair. He burned her rectum. And I mean, they were very recent, we could see, because the body fluids were still oozing out. And he told her, if you make one sound, I'm going to go kill the girls first, and then I'm going to come back and kill you. And so the next morning comes, and she's been sitting there all night, terrified, knowing that she's going to get killed. He still has the bullet in the gun, and she snuck a gun and put it underneath her butt while she was sitting on the edge of the bed. And he tells the girls, go to school. And she said, as soon as the girls closed the door, he said, get ready because you're next. You're going to die now. And he walks over and stands in front of her, points the gun, and she had the wherewithal to pull out the gun she had and shot him twice in the chest. And just like in a horror movie, he falls forward on top of her and he's dying while she's underneath him. And when she called it in, she said, oh, my husband committed suicide. And she was a Hispanic girl and spoke Spanish. So I was speaking to her in Spanish, and I said, well, tell me what happened. She goes, well, I don't know what happened. I just heard the gunshots and I came in and he was on the bed. I said, but how did you get the blood on your chest? Oh, I turned him over and I tried to see if he was alive. And I looked at her and I could tell she was just terrified. And I looked at her and I said, ma'am, that's not what happened. Tell me what happened. And she just broke down and was hysterical and told me the story. And clearly that was an immediate threat of death or serious bodily harm to her and her girls. She had been tortured, which we could see the cigarette burns on her breasts and her pubic area. And I called the DA and I said, hey, this is what we've got. And they said, just write it up. Don't even book her. And that was the end of it.
Wow. Couple things there. That obviously is a real case of battered spouse syndrome, which is no doubt real. Number two, this is why I respect law enforcement so much. I mean, these are the things that Detective Ramos walks around between his ears that he can never unsee or unhear, and it gets worse from there, the things that he has seen. So in my eyes, Detective Phil Ramos is a true American hero who really dedicated his life to making the world a better place. So thank you for that, Detective Ramos. What this is true, Black Widow here. What a diabolical man. That sounds like that guy deserves to be exactly where he is right now. It sounded like there was no help for him, and I'm glad she came clean. It must be incredibly scary, obviously, to go through that, and I hope that the children are doing well. Do you ever keep in touch with people like this, Detective?
I did for a few years afterwards. The kids thankfully weren't there, but they had been witness to the abuse in the prior months before that. So we kept in touch, but eventually they went back to Mexico. She just couldn't stay in Vegas anymore. But and that's your textbook burning bed syndrome or domestic abuse defense, because it was immediate. The evidence was there. We corroborated what she was saying happened. There was absolutely no question that what she was telling us fit exactly with the evidence that we had at the scene. Even with the bullet with her name on it was still in the gun.
Wow.
And it was like, I said, this poor woman, and my heart broke for her.
Oh man, people echoing my sentiments. Couple quick things here. So Josh Ritter, the judge did say, Judge Kraynick said that the defense can bring in a crime scene reconstructionist and psychologist. To what end would what would a reconstructionist do here? I don't understand that. The psychologist I see could say, yeah, she's crazy. I said it before. Is there any way they can pivot, by the way, Josh? This is now a horrible example of interviewing. So I'm asking 47 questions at one time, which is what Anderson Cooper does, which is why I make fun of him, but I'm doing it myself right now. It's hard to get out of that habit. But now I forgot what I was even saying. But Josh, I mean, can they pivot and just at some point just say, look, this woman's crazy if they get a psychologist on the stand?
I don't think they can pivot to that extent. You're talking about mid-trial. If you're going to that's another one of those things. If you're going to bring a mental health defense, that's something that you kind of have to, establish ahead of time, because especially in that type of situation, the prosecution's going to want to get their own experts to examine her and do an evaluation. And if this is going to become a battle of the experts, you have to give the prosecution an opportunity to have her examined by their people as well. And I know that at there was some talk about that being done in this case, even when it was dealing with the battered spouse syndrome, that the judge wanted her to be available to the prosecution to be evaluated for that that syndrome and that diagnosis. But to your question about the crime scene reconstruction, I haven't the foggiest idea where they're going with that. I mean, we see the crime scene. It's caught on video. I don't know what exactly. This isn't one of those things where you have some sort of really complicated set of facts and trying to unravel who shot first type of scenario. This is, we're as you pointed out, Joel, we're watching the murder take place in front of us. So I don't know where they're going with that. It could just be a lot of this is just the defense attorney trying to get some ducks in a row before they head into this trial and see what they may have to use in real time.
Josh, another quick two things, and then I promise we're wrapping. James Owens, the ninth criminal defense attorney, said, and I quote here, "The state has failed to say exactly what it is that they believe is the criminal act that caused the death committed by Sarah Boone." Does the state have to have that
articulated?
Yeah, exactly. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, I mean, the defense is entitled to be put on notice as to what exactly she's being charged with and what the prosecution theory is to arrive at the charges. So she's being charged with murder. There are certain elements of murder. What exactly are you saying satisfies each of those elements so that the defense knows how to defend against those arguments? But here, I don't know what exactly he's crying foul about, because the act was the not letting him out of the suitcase. The act was sitting there watching a man suffocate to death. So, sometimes an act is a failure to act. And this is one of those instances where she was the only person who could have saved his life, and realizing that he's begging. I mean, that's the other thing to not miss. He's not saying, "All right, Sarah, this is boring. Enough with the fun and games. I've got to work to get to tomorrow." He's saying, "I can't breathe." So her sitting there laughing and videotaping him, that's the act. So I don't know where they're going with that. Again, sometimes we throw these defense attorneys under the bus, but I think you kind of have to realize they're working with what they've got. And many times, as in this case, they don't have much.
Yeah. The defense here says that Sarah Boone, this is now the ninth defense attorney, that the defense attorney says Boone was not doing anything illegal, but also says with the battered spouse claim that she purposely killed someone in self-defense. The judge responds to that by saying, "I don't understand that circular logic." By the way, Judge Kraynick is the second judge on this case. And as Josh just pointed out, he's literally saying, "I can't breathe." He's not saying exactly to Josh's point, like, this is not funny. He's telling her directly that he's having a hard time breathing. Josh, just finally, the 6th, 7th, and 8th, this is funny. The 6th, 7th, and 8th attorneys appeared before another judge, I think, and described the difficult conditions they endured working with her and are asking to be paid. What is the deal with lawyers 1 through 8? I mean, she was obviously making it really difficult. Was it a payment issue? Was she just an impossible client to handle?
No, I know some of these were court appointed, meaning that that's how they're getting paid. So they're not worried about her ability to pay. Listen, defense attorneys are used to difficult clients, especially those who come from a public defender background. I mean, it's almost like a badge of honor that it's rare for a defense attorney, and especially a public defender, to ask to be withdrawn from a case, because they don't want to set some sort of precedent that all you have to do is make life miserable for the defense attorney, and that's how you can get rid of them. So the fact that 8 prior people asked to withdraw, and I realize some of them are saying, well, there were conflicts or whatever else. I think that's a lot of lawyer talk for, I don't want to deal with this anymore. So in my view, that's 8 lawyers who said they had had enough. And again, I don't think that came down to difficult to deal with, not seeing eye to eye on certain things. That's kind of par for the course for defense attorneys. There's something fundamentally wrong with the way these relationships were taking place, and the kind of maybe the most insider glimpse that we got to that is there was a situation where one of the attorneys described how she was simply trying to go through the evidence with Sarah, and Sarah said, "I've had enough of this," and left the room. And so it's like, how do you even defend someone if they won't even sit for a moment and listen to what the evidence is against them? That's just somebody, like I said before, who wants to run the entire show. And that's why I believe it's good. It's going to take a team of horses to keep her from taking the stand. That to me is the type of personality that demands to take the stand.
Well, another amazing panel of best guests. It's not a tagline. It is our reality here at Surviving the Survivor. Detective Phil Ramos, 3-time Las Vegas Police Officer of the Year, a retired homicide detective. He infiltrated the Cuban mob. He was undercover, drives a Harley. He's one of the coolest dudes you will ever meet. Your final thoughts here, Detective Ramos, as it relates to this very disturbing case here.
Well, hopefully, if she goes through another attorney, that attorney will say, look, you don't have a chance. Let's just plead and get it over with. Nobody can beat this case. I can't. None of the attorneys before me are going to be able to defend you. Just get it over with and plead on the day that we're supposed to start the trial.
There you go. Sarah, if you're listening, just plead out. And you're, I guess, a pretty horrible human being for what you did. Josh Ritter, he is a former prosecutor of the year, not just in any place, but Los Angeles, second biggest city in the United States. No small potatoes. He currently is a criminal defense attorney with Eldabé Ritter. He is a dad once again, and not as important as that, but very importantly, he is host of Courtroom Confidential, a true crime podcast where he breaks down cases much more fluidly than I do. Josh Ritter from Ida Shaw, an attorney. Josh, there cannot be any claim by Sarah that she has no duty to help remove him, correct? I would assume that anyone who sees someone dying has some sort of duty to do something. So if you want to respond to that question and your final thoughts, Josh.
Yeah, I think what Ida's referencing there is we've heard about these kind of good Samaritan laws of like, how much do you have to get involved in a situation? If you see somebody drowning, are you under some sort of affirmative duty to have to help them? I don't think any of that is going to be at issue here. I mean, she's not only is there evidence that she somehow probably participated in getting him in that suitcase, because by the way, how would he have been able to even zip it up even if he got inside voluntarily? And then, that video alone shows that he's asking her, he's realizing his only way of saving his own life is throwing himself at her mercy, and she denied him any of that in his final moments. But final thoughts on this is that so much of this case has been leading up to this about the antics of this woman and her going through attorneys and her behavior in court and her, all of this kind of sideshow stuff. And I just really look forward to, when we actually get to trial, it focusing far more on the brutality of that moment and what she did to that man in the final moments of his life, and get some justice for George out of this whole thing. And thank you for having me on, Joel. I'll do a quick plug, is that when you guys are not watching STS, I just did a video on Sarah Boone about kind of a Cliff Notes version of what to look forward to in her upcoming trial. But thank you again for having me on.
Yeah, and I'm going to check that out today. I'm going to check that out because I do think we're going to head to the trial next week. It sounds like it's going to be jury selection for a very large portion of the week. For some reason, the judge, and I'm not sure why, said he expects jury selection to take longer than expected. That's why I think it's going to go for that full time. And then I think I'm going to try to go to the trial the following week. And if I do that, I have to clear it with the COE, of course. But I would be doing lunch lives and then a show right after the trial each day. Lindsay Shea, love Josh's shows. Cheer Dad, amen to that. Thank you all. We're going to come back in exactly 55 minutes. We're going to take Sarah Boone's hearing live with Tim Jansen. Hope you'll join us then. Until then, love you, America. Love you, Los Angeles. Love you, Las Vegas. And justice for George. We'll see you at 3 p.m. Eastern Time.